guys, this is ASMHearth. It's been a really long break since our last video, and apologize about that. I'm not gonna make any promises for future consistency because I just don't know how many videos we'll be able to put out. But basically, what happened was, so I started working part-time, as did my roommate who edits the videos, and basically it's a process where we both have to be present, and it was just really hard to find time to set aside for both of us. Even if I had an hour here and there, it had to line up with my roommates as well. But we are going to try to actually start making videos on a regular basis again. We sort of ignored the channel for a few months when we realized we just weren't going to have time, but in the new year our schedules have adjusted a little bit, so we should have some time to make videos, and we noticed that the channel actually had over 100 subscribers now, which was really encouraging. So all of that kind of led to us coming here today to try to revamp and restart the channel again. So we're still gonna be doing Arena on this channel, and today I think we'll just start with an Arena draft and go business as usual. And what do you know, we get the best three choices here. Well, okay, so we have Paladin, Mage, and Rogue, which are the three best classes, both in my opinion and statistically. I think most players might choose Paladin or Mage, but my favorite is actually Rogue, which hasn't always been that way. Mage used to be my favorite, or at least the class I thought was best in Arena. But recently, I think post TGT and LOE, which is the Grand Tournament and the League of Explorers, I think Rogue is actually the best class in Arena, followed by Paladin and very closely by Mage. So I think we're going to go with Rogue today. And Rogue is also just more fun. They have ways of generating a lot of tempo with backstab and sap and very efficient removal and just very aggressive, fun, quick games. Okay, so among these first three choices we have Unearthed Raptor, Bloodsail Corsair, and Stampeding Kodo. And we can eliminate Bloodsail Corsair right off the bat. One-drops aren't too bad in Rogue. They kind of need a few of them to trigger combos, but Bloodsail Corsair is bottom tier one-drop. Then we have the Kodo and Unearthed Raptor. I think Kodo used to be a very good card in Arena, but I think it's kind of dropped off a little bit. I don't like it as much as I used to. I think the card quality overall has just increased since since there was just a basic and common cards, and I think Unearthed Raptor is really good. 3 mana 3/4 is never bad, and you have the option of getting an additional effect from that battle cry, so it's got to be Unearthed Raptor. Okay, well, we can't use Mad Scientist in Rogue because there's no secrets, so it'd just be a 2 mana 2/2, which is pretty awful. And that leaves us with Acidic Swamp Ooze and Haunted Creeper. I think Creeper's probably the better option here. It's just a better 2-drop overall. I'm not super worried about weapons or anything. You don't face too many warriors or things like that in Arena. You do face Paladins and Rogue, but I think Creeper's just better overall. It's not situational, and Acidic Swamp Ooze is a little bit situational. Okay, so here we've got an interesting choice. We've got Flame Juggler and Defias Ringleader. Vanish is not really an option here. It doesn't do a whole lot for Rogue. But both these, Flame Juggler and Defias Ringleader, are decent options. Basically, Defias Ringleader is probably the best card in the game. If you're going second on turn 1, you just coin it out. You get a 2/2 and a 2/1. You get 4/3 worth of stats. That is very difficult for your opponent to respond to. But Flame Juggler is non-conditional. It's not situational. You can just drop it anytime. And dropping Defias Ringleader when you're going first on turn 2 is not very good. Obviously, the Flame Juggler is a lot better in that situation. And yeah, it's actually kind of a tough choice. They're both pretty good. I think most people would probably say Defias Ringleader by a slight edge, but I really like Flame Juggler a lot. I just like having non-conditional cards. I'm gonna go Flame Juggler. Okay, here we have Gnomish Inventor, Argent Squire, and Frost Elemental. I don't really like Gnomish Inventor in Rogue, because Rogue usually gets their card draw from things like Sprint and stuff, and they have some card draw options with Fan of Knives and stuff like that. And Gnomish Inventor is not a very good tempo card. It's an anti-tempo. You're exchanging stats on the board for a card in your hand, and that's not usually Rogue's playstyle until they have to draw cards towards the end of the game with Sprint. Frost Elemental's pretty good. It's actually kind of a tempo card. Freezing an opponent's big minion is basically taking it off the board for a turn. A lot of times that's all Rogue needs to push for that extra damage. But Argent Squire is a very high quality 2-drop, especially if you're able to throw like a Cold Blood or a Tinker's Oil onto it. So I think I'm going to go Argent Squire here. It's very nice early tempo. Okay, here we have some more pretty good choices here. Stormpike in Constructed is awful, but in Arena, being able to deal 2 damage and get a body on the board is pretty valuable. It's very costly, 5 mana to do it. But it's not quite as bad as it looks on first glance, I think. Harvest Column used to be probably the best 3-drop in the game. Has since lost that title for sure. But it's still above average, and I think it's not too bad of a pick here. Then we have Frost Elemental again, which is an option for the reasons previously stated. But I think Harvest Golem is going to be the play here. 3-drops are it's hard to find good 3-drops in Arena. Luckily, Rogue does have good 3-mana options with Fan of Knives and SI7 Agent and things like that. Perdition's Blade. But I like Harvest Golem a lot. It's a very sticky minion. I think we go with that. Alright, so we know we're picking a 5-drop here. This is interesting because they're actually all very high quality 5-drops. I mean, I'd be happy with any of these in my deck. It's very interesting comparisons here. A lot of it has to do with comparing stat distributions and abilities. So here you've got a 5-mana card that gives you a 6/6 worth of stats on the board, divided between a 4/4 and a 2/2. You've got a 5-mana 5/6, very just vanilla card. Then the 5-mana 5/5 with stealth. They're all pretty good. The only thing I don't like about Silverhand Knight is it gets wrecked by Flame Strike. But you don't see a Flame Strike as often now in Arena, so I think this card's value is slightly increased lately. Pit Fighter is a very solid card. 5/6 is just great stats. Yeah, it doesn't have any abilities, but sometimes it just having full value for the 5 mana is better than reducing the stats and adding some kind of text like stealth. So Stranglethorn Tiger having stealth is actually very good in Rogue. It sometimes allows you, when your opponent has like 6 health left and you don't have any direct damage, you can put down the Stranglethorn. They can't remove it with no matter how big their board is, and you just attack next turn. But Pit Fighter 5-mana 5/6 I think is still better, even though it's nothing special. I think it's just slightly better. Having that extra health on the 5/6 is pretty significant. Okay, so here we've got Mad Scientist, which is not an option. Puddle Stomper, Ancient Brewmaster. This text is not a tempo text at all. It's very anti-tempo. It can be useful in the late game to heal something, but a lot of times you're paying the full cost of that card to heal it. So if you're healing like a Stormwind Champion, you're paying 7 mana to restore it to full health if you play it again or something. Or I guess a 6-mana card would apply more since you want to do it in the same turn. But my point still stands that it's more of a value card. And if that battle cry is used on turn 4, a lot of times it's a negative. So we have to go Puddle Stomper here. Okay, here we have Tomb Pillager. That's a new League of Explorers card. We've got Reckless Rocketeer and Anti-Killbot. I think Reckless Rocketeer is a pretty bad card. It's okay in Rogue, because it just helps you push for lethal, and any card that does that in Rogue is going to be a little better than it is in other classes. Got Anti-Killbot, which is still good in Rogue, because you're going to be taking a lot of damage when you use your hero power, and have to punch all these minions. But Tomb Pillager is a 4-mana 5/4. It doesn't lack any stats. In terms of its raw stat line, it's perfectly acceptable 5/4. And it has the death route of adding a coin to your hand, which is very good. It helps a lot in Rogue. I mean, obviously this is a Rogue class card, but it really helps pull off combos later. You can do this into like, well, usually after you play this, it's not as hard to pull off combos, but you'd be surprised how many times I need to do that on like an SI7 agent or something like that. So we'll go Tomb Pillager. Shadow Step is terrible in Arena. It's pretty much just throw away a card. We've got Wolf Rider, and we've got Silverhand Knight. I think Silverhand Knight's got to be the way to go on this one. It's just a high value card, as I mentioned before. Okay, Wailing Soul is pretty bad. Normally that battle cry is a negative. It's very hard to get any positive value, and on top of that, you're losing a stat to gain a mostly negative battle cry, so this is just not an option, especially when you compare it to Violet Teacher on the left here, which is very good in Rogue. I think some early Miracle Rogue decks used Violet Teacher a lot to generate tokens, and just very good in Rogue. That tends to be very spell heavy. Even though I don't have any spells yet, I think Violet Teacher is the way to go. Sun Fury Protector isn't bad. That battle cry is almost always positive because you can control it. You can tell it which minions to give taunt, and a 2-mana 2/3 is acceptable. But I think Violet Teacher is the way to go. Oh man, I really don't like any of these choices. Vanish is just very bad. It clears the board, but immediately gives the tempo to your opponent because you've only got, a little bit of mana left the rest of your turn to try to put something on the board, and they can easily answer that, and it just puts you behind. And Rogue normally doesn't have card advantage, so it just doesn't work with the Rogue's playstyle unless you're playing like Mill Rogue. Then we have a Nubar Ambusher, which has very nice stats, but that death rattle is just so detrimental, especially when you're playing an aggressive deck, and that means you're going to have other minions next to this minion, most likely, if the game is going well for you. It's a decent card if you're playing from behind, but again, you're only getting one extra stat for that detrimental death rattle, so I'm not a huge fan of it. But then we have Thrallmar Farseer over here, which is just even more bad. It's missing a lot of stats, and it should be like a 3-4 or a 4-3 or something. And then Wind Fury isn't actually that good of an ability. I think the devs for Hearthstone kind of overvalued Wind Fury when they made the game, because it helps a lot with face damage, basically doubles the attack, but it does nothing for board control. I mean, there's really not a whole lot that Wind Fury does at all for board control. Even still, I think we may have to go through Almar. I just hate Anubar Ambusher so much. Yeah, I think we have to go through Almar. Some interesting choices here. Booty Bay Bodyguard, Ice Rager, Murloc Tiny Fin. Murloc Tiny Fin is okay in Rogue, and that it can help you get off combos, but we don't have any combo cards yet, and we have a 1-drop and a couple 2-drops that can help with that. I'm not too worried about getting combos off right now. We have Ice Rager and Booty Bay, which are comparable, I guess. Basically, Booty Bay is Ice Rager, but pay 2 mana more for 2 more health and taunt, which when you put it like that, sounds pretty bad. I think we might have to go with Ice Rager. It's substantially better than its brother Magma Rager. Double the health, which means it can't be hero powered, so it's not a terrible card. I think Ice Rager is the way to go. Here's some interesting choices. So Ancient Brewmaster I don't really like here. I much prefer Tomb Spider. I really like the Discover mechanic. I think it's been a very big success being released in the League of Explorers. Very nice flexibility on it. And a beast can be anything from a 1-drop to like a 9-drop with King Crush, or, giant Malorn minion. You basically can just choose a minion of whichever tier you want most of the time, whether you need a mid-range control or aggro minion. Fossilized Devilsaur is pretty bad, but 8-mana 8/8 is always acceptable. Basically a conditional Ironbark Protector. But I think Tomb Spider is the way to go. Okay, Gang Up is not a good choice here right off the bat. It's terrible in Arena. Doesn't add any value to the board at all. Frigid Snowbolt's okay in Rogue, actually, with some spell damage, but one thing that's concerning me is we don't have any spells, and we're already halfway through the draft, so that spell damage really means nothing to me, so I just have to evaluate it as a 4-mana 2/6. And if I do that, I think Argent Squires is still better. I like having a lot of 1-drops in Rogue. Really helps even out the mana curve and just overwhelm the opponent, especially when they're sticky, like this one is Argent Squire, so I think we gotta go Argent Squire there. Okay, another choice between Cultmaster and Tomb Spider. Sinister Strike is not a good option here, even though it's a spell, it just does nothing. 3 damage to the hero with no board presence is pretty bad. So we have to go for either Cultmaster or Tomb Spider. Cultmaster wouldn't be too bad, it works very well with Squire. I think minions that your opponent doesn't really want to remove. So they're kind of, you always tend to have a board presence. Same with Harvest Golem. So Cult Master does have some extra utility here, I think. Card draw is always important in Arena, but Doom Spider provides card draw as well. And it's just hard to figure out which one would be better. Initially, when I saw these three cards, I was leaning toward Doom Spider, but I may have convinced myself to go Cult Master, looking at the minions we have with a Haunted Creeper and a Harvest Golem. And also, Unearthed Raptor can probably copy a Harvest Golem or Haunted Creeper a couple times for us. So I think I'm going to go Cult Master, actually. Okay, this is a very easy choice here, because we have two of the worst 3-drops in the game with Nomergon Infantry and Silverback Patriarch. I mean, it just has to be Stranglethorn. I don't really think I need to go too in-depth with this. It's an easy pick. 5 mana, 5/5 stealth. That's pretty good. This next pick is also very easy. Spiteful Smith is extremely good in Rogue. 4 mana, 5/6 is not too bad of a stat line. I mean, usually the worst thing that happens when you play this is it eats a fireball and you lose 1 mana of tempo against a mage. And even then, that's perfectly fine. In best case scenarios, you just get endless value out of this Enrage, where you have a hero power, basically a hero power of a Fiery War Axe. So, it's gotta be Spiteful Smith. Here we have some interesting choices. Yeti used to be one of the best cards in Arena. 4 mana, 4/5 was king in Arena for a long time. And then they introduced Spider Tank at 3 mana, 3/4, which was similar, but maybe not quite as good. But then we have Deadly Poison. And I think Deadly Poison is better than both of these, especially considering that we don't have a whole lot of early game, especially for Rogue. Rogues really like to have a lot of early game. So I think I'm going to pass up both vanilla minions here, the 4 mana and the 3 mana, and go for Deadly Poison. Try to get some spells as well for Violet Teacher and whatever we may draw down the line. Okay, this choice is pretty easy as well. It's a 3 mana creature, obviously, and it's going to be Jungle Panther. Nomergon is just not... It's basically 3 mana, deal 1 damage most of the time. It's not a whole lot, not doing a whole lot. 3 mana, 2/3 with Taunt is slightly better than Nomergon, but still very understated. It's very rare for the Enrage mechanic to go off, because you always have to play Tauren Warrior on turn 3 or later. And there are very few 3-drops in the game that can't deal with a 3 health minion. So it's just extremely rare to ever get this Enrage mechanic to go off and be useful. And even when it does, it becomes, if it deals like 1 damage somehow to it, it becomes a 5/2 minion, which is what Ice Rager is, and that's already a 3 mana 5/2 without any conditional requirement. So this has to be Jungle Panther. Okay, here we've got Cockmaster's Wrench, which is an awful weapon. Might as well just be the Rogue 0 power. Even if we had mechs, I still wouldn't do it, and we only have 1 that I see here in Harvest Golem. Frost Giant is okay, but not that good in Rogue, because Rogue doesn't hero power every turn, usually. Sometimes they buff up their weapon and they want to keep it, and they don't always hero power, so it's got to be a Recombobulator. 2 mana, 3/2 is fine, but also that Battle Cry can be very useful on cards like Doom Spider and Silver Hand Knight, things that have a useful Battle Cry and are understated because of it. Lord of the Arenas, I don't really like it. I mean, only having 5 health and 6 for 6 mana is not appealing. But it is a big body with Taunt and can kind of help you protect some of your other minions. Sometimes help you gain lethal by protecting them. Sometimes can prevent your opponent from getting lethal, but I still like Raging Warg in here. The Dalaran Mage is pretty bad. 3 mana, 1/4 with spell damage is irrelevant because we don't have any backstabs or eviscerates, so it's got to be Raging Warg, I think. Getting a little concerned so far in this draft without having any backstabs, eviscerates, no Buccaneers, no real weapon buffs other than Deadly Poison. So hopefully we encounter some kind of removal in the next 9 cards. So here, Stone Duskboar is 1 mana, deal 1 damage basically. Slightly more value with a, with a Cult Master. But then, even then, it's not even that great. It's basically a 1 mana Shiv at that point, deal 1 damage, draw a card. I think Moogle's Champion's gotta be the play. Well, here's an interesting pick. So there's Direwolf Alpha, which is very good with cards like Haunted Creeper and Argent Squire, and Harvest Golem, sticky minions. But I kind of want Assassin's Blade just because of how much we're lacking removal right now. If you're able to deadly poison Assassin's Blade, that can sometimes win you the game right there. So I think we have to go Assassin's Blade here, even though we have a lot of late game. I think we need the removal, and we'll just try to focus on the early game for the rest of the 7 cards in our draft. Alright, this next one has to be Dread Corsair. It's extremely good in Rogue. At worst, with the hero power equipped, it's an Iron Fur Grizzly. At best, it's a free card if you have like an Assassin's Blade that's been deadly poisoned. Or if Assassin's Blade is just out there, it's a 1-mana 3/3 with taunt. I think Dread Corsair has got to be the play there. Anti-Killbot is tempting here, but I think we already have too many 5-drops, and we have a lot of 5-drops here. So I think it's got to be Argent Horse Rider, which is a very quality 3-drop, and helps with the early game. It's sticky. It helps with the Cult Master. So I think it's got to be Argent Horse Rider. Alright, finally we're getting some nice tempo cards here with Backstab and Sap. I like both of them. I think Sap is slightly better. It's just destroys certain classes like a druid or anything with big minions that they think they're going to stabilize when they drop like an Ironbark Protector, and then you just remove it and play a ton more crap to handle it the next turn, or they play a Sunwalker and you sap it. It just has a lot of utility. It's such a good tempo play. I have some interesting choices here. Again, we're faced with a Yeti, which is never a bad pick, but we have a lot of 4 and 5 drops already, so I think it's got to be a 2 or a 3 drop. And because these are all high quality 2, 3, and 4 drops in Rogue, and just because we're lacking 2 drops, I think I want to go with the Bloodsail Raider more than the Shattered Sun Cleric. It's fine to play it on turn 2 as a 2-3. I think that's the correct pick here, considering what we've already drafted. Next, we've got the Clockwork Knight, usually just a 5-mana 5/5, but every now and then you do get to use that battle cry. Reckless Rocketeer and Shield Bearer. Shield Bearer is terrible. Reckless Rocketeer is pretty bad. It's got to be Clockwork. Okay, that's a pretty good 2-drop here in Hungry Toad. Or, excuse me, Huge Toad. I really like the artwork on this guy. It's got a little boot hanging out. The golden version of Huge Toad is really appealing. It's got its mouth opening and closing, and kind of made me want to craft it golden. But aside from that, I think it's the best pick. Youthful Brewmaster has that same battle cry of returning a friendly minion, and that's just not tempo at all. I mean, usually best case scenario with this is I play it on turn 2 as a 2-mana 2/3, or 2-mana 3/2, and I'm happy. So this has that with the Death Rattle, which also helps our Unearthed Raptor. So Huge Toad is the play. Okay, that's a pretty good late game card, and you know what? Unearthed Raptor might be able to copy that Death Rattle, which would be extremely valuable. Blood Knight isn't too bad with all the shielded mini-bots and Noyatrons and Silent Knights that you tend to see in Arena. So it's actually gotten better in the last year, I think, especially with the last 2 expansions with how prevalent Paladin is. Seal of Champions and things like that, but I still think Piloted Sky Golem is going to seal out a few games for us, so I have to go with that. And that's our draft. If I'm going to be perfectly honest, I think this is a below average Rogue draft, mainly because of the early game. It's lacking anything. It's lacking a lot of key cards like Buccaneer. Buccaneer is my favorite Rogue card, I think. You can play it on turn 1 if you really have to, and it just commands removal. If you play it on turn 1, they have to coin hero power it, and it just commands a lot of attention. And if they don't, then you just get infinite value out of that little guy. And you can also just combo him with Assassin's Blade on turn 6 to get a 4/4 weapon. You can use him on turn 3. It's a very good card, and we're lacking cards like that. We're lacking Backstabs, we're lacking Eviscerates, cards that just get so much value for their mana that are very high tempo plays. We're really lacking a lot of removal, which is unfortunate, but that's okay. I think this is a very high minion quality deck, so we'll see how it goes. I think I'm going to end the video now. And I'm gonna go ahead and play a few games after this, but I'm gonna divide up the draft and the gameplay. But I hope you guys enjoyed this draft. Feel free to critique my picks in the comments if you feel like one was a bad pick or you had a different opinion. I always like reading other people's opinions on arena drafts, because no two arena drafts are the same. One card might be the correct pick in one draft and be the incorrect pick in the next one, even if you're choosing among the same three minions. Just kind of how just the nature of arena, where the way your deck looks is very it can change what you pick. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'm gonna go right into playing a game with this deck. So yeah, stay tuned. We'll probably post the videos together, but if not, the gameplay video will be coming very soon.